All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our lunar musing, our loser muning. That's kind of a little bit how it feels. Studying the astrology for this time, I think the loser muning sounds actually quite kind of perfect. Anyway, it's really nice to see your faces after the break that we've taken over this last month. Um, yeah, so let's see, it looks like we've got, let me just pull this other person over here. There we go. So we're just going to dive into the lunar cycle tonight and give a little bit of life to Venus since she is on her waning side into the underworld in this next week. So, for those of you that have been tracking with that cycle, we're starting to enter the final breaths of our death by intent. But I'm going to go ahead and start off actually with the lunar cycle. And we've got a new moon coming up here on February 11th. And we have a lot of planets in Aquarius. So I'm not sure how many of you have been tracking with that, but at the moment of the new moon, we'll have the moon, sun, Pallas, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter and Saturn all in Aquarius. So it's been slowly moving in that direction over the last couple of weeks with more and more planets entering that sign. And then when we get to the new moon, the moon will join us. So um, I'm actually kind of curious with our Aquarian Lily in the house. How's it feeling out there with all of these planets in Aquarius? How's that collective ride been for you?
It's been really amazing, and I'm grateful for something you told me a couple years ago about Mercury, that sometimes it dips down and disappears for a while, but it will come back. And that's I just haven't had words lately. And today this whole stream of like understanding and insight came through. So I was reminded of what you said about Mercury, that it does come back. And I have all of these planets at my crown. So Saturn just crossed my sun, and it's on the way to my Saturn return. But yeah, it feels really amazing, very opening, and just all this like wisdom and light pouring through. I'm capitalizing on it as much as I can.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. It feels like during times like this, you've really got to take every affirming positive stream as it comes in and let it carry, as much as possible. So I really love hearing that. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. Um, I'm just curious too. Is there anyone else that's been having such a strong experience? I've just been hearing such different, like really the multifacetedness of this particular astrology right now has been really striking me. With some folks really having a lot of emotional impact and kind of feeling where stuck energy or a different kind of energy is hitting places in them that's moving a lot. So I'm actually just kind of curious to get like a little pulse of how things have been affecting you all.
And Fiona is trying to get in, Marcella.
Oh, thank you for. I'm going to make you a host just in case you want to help out in that way. I forget. It takes a little bit to stay on top of all that.
I can just chime in. I have a stellium in Leo, so I'm holding the opposite sign, and it is intense and it's kind of weird. I feel weird, and sometimes it's very magical and there's a lot going on, but then sometimes it slips into really sensing that there's a lot of, there's upper and lower vibrations of Aquarius, and I'm feeling it across the spectrum, really. So I would say it's not a very comfortable position as a Leo. And I usually love like oppositions because you can balance in the middle, but It's a heavy load, like if you think of it as a balance scale. And to have everything triggered as oppositions is, yeah, just interesting. I mean, I'm definitely making it through, but it's definitely not comfortable, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's really beautiful. And I actually was I want to bring in actually the fixed star of Regulus a bit in this report tonight because of where the sun and moon are located. Um, and I think what you're speaking to is really potent, Carolyn, because we often talk about the age of Aquarius, and I know I've harped on this, but for those of you that haven't heard my harping quite as much, when you're coming into an age like the age of Aquarius, you can't discount the need of the evolutionary process to be focusing on its equal and opposite, which in this case is Leo. And I think Carolyn just gave voice to that really beautifully, in that as we're creating a vessel or a stronger container to hold a collective energy, that means every single one of us has to get more grounded in our own sense of self from a new place in order to create that container. It doesn't come from actually escaping ourselves. It doesn't come from um, a false selflessness or a false sense of collective consciousness. It actually comes from us becoming more inhabited, more Leoed, so to speak, but not from a place of personality or ego, but from a place of selfhood. And that's a different space to occupy. So I love what you're weaving in here, Carolyn, because it really does help from my vantage point to accentuate that while it can feel like a heavy load, to have all these planets in Aquarius, when I look especially at this new moon chart, it's like such a powerful possibility of having to force us to become more unto ourselves in order to actually be capable of being with that kind of a collective load on the Aquarius side of things. Um, so let's keep going here. I'm just curious. Yeah, Fiona's jumping right in.
Because I've been living on that axis all my life, and like I'm what Aquarius rising, Aquarius moon, but I'm Leo sun. So I've been working that opposite for forever, and feels like so at the moment actually it doesn't feel any different. It feels I feel I'm having quite a peaceful time.
Yeah.
you know but I'm watching it, really interesting. I mean, I'm also an airhead a bit. If Aquarius is that much air, I'm all in Libra and Aquarius and Gemini, apart from some things in Leo. So I guess, yeah, I suppose that balance, with the moon in Aquarius and the sun in Leo, and it being rising and descendant, it's perhaps been, a whole part of my focus all the time. So I feel like I'm just kind of sitting in the middle of it at the moment.
Beautiful. I mean, I almost feel like we should be saying thank you, Fiona, for working that edge so much throughout the course of your life, because that helps us have the sort of architecture, I think, on some level more accessible in terms of how we do it. So I just want to acknowledge for all the mysteries that we don't understand, that perhaps in some way that you've been working this one actually is really quite a contribution to the rest of us that may not feel quite as mature in our own handling of it. Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Eliza.
So I have an Aquarian South Node and a Leo North Node. So this is also a axis that I'm working this lifetime pretty heavily. And it's interesting because I've been doing all of this this work since really the new moon, this last new moon. And during all this Aquarian time, I've been doing all these releasing ceremonies.
Mm.
And I've been working on my shadows and kind of these like Buddhist feeding your demon kind of stuff. So I've been working on these old patterns. And as Aquarius is my south node, it's interesting that all this kind of stuff around working old patterning is coming up. So that's cool to really recognize how the south node is showing up for me. But I also have a Aquarian Mercury that is on the 23rd degree. So it's around the same point as this new moon. And my nodal axis is on the 10th degree. So I have a little bit of a span there. And yeah, so it'll be interesting as the new moon hits my Mercury. I've been asked actually in this women's new moon group that I have to do an astrology reading for the moment. And so I haven't really done this in a group format before. And so here I am kind of working that access of moving into kind of a Leo leadership position while being in Aquarius and my Mercury communicating astrology. So that's kind of my little insight about working this access on the nodes.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. That's really, it seems like you're also pulling in this patterning piece, which right now Mars is square all of these planets in Aquarius. And so that definitely brings in um, certain kinds of tensions for engagement that actually do have a lot to do with pulling patterns on a collect. So that's happening for everyone collectively. And then with your South Node there, I'm sure it gets to have an extra special past sort of um, entangled boost in a way that may be
Yeah.
extra fun for you. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
but it
Okay.
sounds like you're pushing off it too with this opportunity as well, which sounds like a great untangling, a great potential
Yeah,
for untangling.
totally. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else feel called to weave in here? I just love getting these little pulses. Really, especially with this one, feels really strong for me. So I'm appreciating it. Yeah, go ahead, Sylviane.
Um, a couple things. I appreciated your comment, Lily, because I've been aware that Mercury made its exact conjunction with the sun early this morning, I think. And so it's at the peak of that underworld time, that diving down time. And I think, there's such a cultural mainstream pop narrative about Mercury retrograde. And this seems to fly in the face of it, but you were talking about, with all that natal Aquarius and information, and I'm kind of feeling it in my own way because I have my descendant in Aquarius at 23 degrees. And a relationship stuff is definitely coming up, but all that information could be seen as Mercury is there at the sun at great mystery, right? Bringing in the messages, and maybe, they'll flower out in a way, but it's a transmission. And then I really appreciate, Marcella, you talking about the piece. For me, one of the big shadows of Aquarius, and that worries me that everybody's going around, oh, the age of Aquarius, great, great, great. It's like the shadow is a false unity that, like AI or the New World Order, or, we've all got to wear masks or else, I just was in the grocery store today in Yuma and I had to come back in the van and cry because I can't wear a mask because I can't breathe because I don't have good lungs. And, just feeling the cultural thing because I never want to push people's buttons, and I'm wearing it kind of half-assed, and I'm apologizing to the checker and explaining, and no one cares, it's just like, but it just all feels so we've lost our grounding in our individuality. How do we, again, that axis that you've woven your whole life, Fiona, of what is the balance, so yeah, that's seems really strong right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for weaving in the crying in the car piece, because that seems to be a piece of what's happening right now too, which is there's some kind of pressure, and I'm not sure if part of that is this is how Mars and Uranus is also playing a part with all of this, but um, it does seem like there is something occurring that's actually forcing a certain amount of emotional material to actually help kind of move it all and feel it all, um, with our humanity, almost like a counterforce to what you're speaking into, Sylviane, of the AI and the part of us that can go into a collective conformity. That's not necessarily a collective expression of humanity. That's not the full flowering of the human being or the species. That's a homogenization of, something that can come off. And for me, I always think of that scene. In that movie, shoot, the name of it is escaping me right now, where all of the parent, like the kids are all playing basketball at the same time, and then all the doors open and all the parents come out at the same time and say, it's time for dinner, and then all the kids come in and it's like, see, look at how good our society is running. Everyone is on time and they're all doing it the right way, but there's actually no here, there's no humanity, there's no presence, there's no aliveness. It's actually missing. And so I think there's a lot for us to learn about what it truly means to flower as a human being and to flower as a species. And I think that requires a container that we're still learning how to inhabit. It's not necessarily about the mechanics. It's a little bit more about the organics. Yeah, go ahead, Liz. And she got it. Pamela just wrote in, it's a wrinkle in time. That's the one. Yes, Pamela, thank you. That just alleviates that part of my mind that likes mechanics.
So I've seen it a lot in the work that I'm doing, being a medical massage therapist. I'm going to be exact with my sun in opposition with the new moon. And also I have Chiron in Aquarius. So that's that bridged healer. And so I'm watching it with my people. They're all like popping open and going to these new places that they haven't gone to before. And so it's been really interesting to know that I know that I have to be going there for them to go there. And so I watch it in them and go, oh, okay, well, I'm making shifts and changes too. But it's been a really interesting thing to watch just over the past week, really, to have this coming on.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that sort of firsthand report of the healing lens of all of this.
Yeah.
It just feels really appropriate. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's interesting. Yeah, none of you were on this full moon ceremony that I was a part of last week or a couple weeks ago. We had this experience of working. We wanted to kind of hold the structure of the ceremony where someone was holding a sacred fire, even though it was over Zoom, and someone was keeping a heartbeat drum. And someone wanted to offer flutes for part of their sharing. And you know how Zoom is, right? There's like all these different things that happen with sound, and it can't hold things. Um, and what you just shared is stimulating this for me, Liz, because for whatever reason, it's just the insight just came in so strong that sometimes when we are trying to collaborate in new ways, or we're trying to bring in a new energy into a form or a body that has pre-existed, the actual structure is not there to hold the energetics. It's actually the system is it's almost like the coming together forces a change. It forces something to activate, to hold things anew. And we can't always have that prepared for us, even though ritually speaking, it would be nice. It would be nice that when a new energy comes in, our body is ready to receive it. And that may not be how this goes for everyone all the time. That may
Oh, and
happen.
I've seen that also. where,
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of working and somebody's going, whoa, this is way too intense. Like we have to back down. And
Yeah.
my energy is very electric as it is. So when I'm working on people, it's not always easy, but they're getting it more. This is the other thing. People who have never really gotten things energetically are totally getting it. They're like, something's different, something's changing. And that actually, to me, speaks to be like the most miraculous part of it. Like these people who are like church going, like stuck in the mud, what the church says is the only way to be, are just like popping open to these new places. That is really very special to watch.
Mm. Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I just, it does feel important to recognize that for as much as we might be able to tune into things with our consciousness, which is amazing that we can do that as human beings. I mean, it's really
Mhm.
amazing that we have these different qualities that allow us to move and maneuver and connect in the ways that our consciousness can. When these radical and dramatic shifts are happening energetically and they're entering the body is not necessarily as open as the mind. And even what Liz is describing here is you've got also we're an inner mix of all kinds of stuff, like our consciousness and our bodies are usually not fully aligned as much as we may focus and intend that to be true and work towards that. Oftentimes our body is carrying really counter evolutionary forces that maybe forces isn't the right word, but patterns and energetics that we're learning how to clear and come into some kind of new relationship to. And so during times like this, I do think it's really nice to remember that it's okay if we don't know how to do it. It's okay if it feels like an assault to our bodies, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Like our body is saying, whoa, 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 I don't know how to hold this. It just reminds me of the flute and the drum trying to figure out how to coexist over Zoom. It's a little funky. It's kind of like, wait, how do I have that and that coexist inside of me? Zoom doesn't know how to do it yet. And so there's ways we don't either. And so to really give some space and understand that some things can't be created in us until they're being activated through us. So the structure gets built simultaneously as the energy comes in. So no matter how many practices we might have for preparation, when that intercourse happens in some ways, there's going to be a lot that comes with it, a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, a lot of sensation, perhaps fear, perhaps, a need to take space and hold back and then re-engage. But if you think of it as a powerful creative process, rather than something you were supposed to be equipped and ready for, it might just allow the mess to be more like lovemaking, rather than like destruction. Because it's true that some things are dying while new things are coming in. So, some of these processes don't always feel like bliss, but I do think that the lovemaking process can help remind us that bliss is also available, even if the process sometimes actually requires moving through and confronting sometimes things that aren't always congruent at the same time that the experience is offering um, complexity. Complexity. Pam, Sheridan, do you want to share anything? You don't have to. I'm not going to force anyone. I just sort of was taking a pulse on just how the astrology has been feeling to you, or just how things have been feeling to you.
Are you talking to me?
I am talking to you.
Okay, I'm Pamela Snow, and so I didn't know if it was me. I'm just getting in a little bit late to the meeting. I apologize. And I don't know much about astrology, actually. So I don't know that I can say too much. Just that I've been feeling, I can't tell how much of it is, outside of me and how much of it is inside of me. But I've been doing a lot of cross country skiing, I feel like the shift since midwinter, like more light energy is really, that's what it seems like is impacting me more than anything, but I don't know how that is with astrology. I feel a lot of physical energy, a lot of physical awakening happening right now for me. And I think that's probably the strongest. I have a lot of less patience for being on the computer all day, which I've been really struggling with throughout the pandemic, having to work remotely. And energetically, I feel like a prisoner. And I think that like I'm allowing, when I'm not on the screen, I'm really like just much more in my body and just really able to breathe more and feeling much more alive physically, just within the last week.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm really digging the part of what you were saying about you don't know what part is on the inside and what part is on the outside, in part because that is such an Aquarian theme that we work with a lot in soul level astrology, even though you probably didn't intend it that way. But it definitely speaks to part of my experience too, where I literally have to tell people oftentimes, I'm actually not sure what I've spoken and what I've thought. Like, it's really hard for me to figure out what's happening in my head and what's coming out of my mouth. And there's been a lot of lore that has been set up by Elias Longsdale, who's one of the main mentors of our astrology school, and the sort of astrology wisdom that he's brought through, which is that, you know, when we come into this time of the age of Aquarius, that it's almost like our inner world is becoming the outer world. And so it can start to feel almost a little confusing because so many things have been held so deeply on the inside that discrimination between inner and outer actually becomes a real thing to have to work with. And so I appreciate that part of Aquarius that you are kind of giving voice to in that way. Yeah, so thank you for that. I feel like letting you rest, Sheridan. Is there anything you wanted to bring in or not? I don't want to force you to talk out there in Hawaii. I can see I can see you in your kitchen.
Aloha, everyone. No, I would not describe your energy as forcing, Marcella.
Okay. You're definitely invited, but I don't want to force you.
Yeah. I am definitely I've been really physically ill for, it's just going on and on. I feel like a broken record. I don't know, maybe a couple of months. And so that kind of overshadows everything because it's really hard to function on other levels with a lot of the physicality going on. And I have moments of like, I guess you call it sort of gratitude, inspiration, gratitude, but it's feeling where I just love that I am seated from a new vantage point in this, whatever you call it, a letting go, a death cycle place. And I really do love that. And, but I'm also in this moment, pretty despondent. I have a special ceremony place that calls me when I really need to let go, and I haven't been well enough to get there, out in nature, a little ways out. And it's really, I just, I have a great relationship with it, and anyway, so I'm just kind of bummed. So that's about it.
Yeah, thanks Sheridan for echoing the piece of being earthed that is not always the most pleasurable of the limitations of the body, and how much that can well, it becomes dominant in so many ways, and there's just a surrender that gets forced. I mean, I just really want to honor your speaking of that, and um, especially when you have the awareness, of how to take care in certain ways, and then the body is not going to permit that to happen in the way that you know how. So it kind of forces something else than just what you know. Um, but anyway, my heart goes out to you in that spot right there, which I know so many are working with. And yeah, what a time, what a time, like what a time with just the physical pieces. So thanks for speaking that. So I want to give some voice here to this fixed star Regulus, which this new moon is opposing. Regulus is kind of known as the heart star, and it's connected to Christ consciousness through the sign of Leo. And I really love pairing, Aquarius again with this sort of Christ consciousness, and the story that for me is the most inspiring when we talk about, Christ consciousness, which is the idea that liberation lives in each and every one of us, that we don't need a priest or a shaman or a mediator to facilitate our connection with spirit, or our own full potential for death and rebirth and full awakening and full consciousness. All of those pieces are what I associate with this sort of art form, actually, of being able to be divine and human simultaneously through whatever story serves us. But in some ways, I do like to weave in this Christ consciousness and this Christ story, because I do feel like it gives life to all the stories on the planet, even the ones that I have often had such a resistance to because of how they've been abused and misused. So in this way, with this sort of setup we have on this new moon, there is this opportunity of kind of reclaiming our capacity as individuals and our own individual spark to be that source of our own liberation. And while this collective piece is happening, which is so also important to give voice to, it does feel equally important to give voice to this creative spark that lives in each one of us, and to remember that it's essential to honor the sovereignty of each and every one in order to have the most creatively potentized capacity. Because if what we're doing collectively is actually putting out the spark of the individual, then what are we actually creating? What is that collective force? And one of the sort of laws of Leo, which I'm not going to get right tonight, I can just tell based on my jumble of words, has to do with like a vow that says, I will never diminish another's light. That I will shine my light as an opportunity and an invitation for everyone's light to shine. And when we hold our selfhood as the opportunity to actually crystallize ourselves not from a place of Shri, look at me, look at what a great personality I am, look at how big I am, but from a really human, like a humble, surrendered place of, wow, I have been given this body. Whoa, I've been given this nature. Wow, I've actually dedicated some time and energy to self understanding in a way that lets me get out of the way so that the creation can come through. And that's where, again, this sort of heartbeat, for me, it always comes through the heartbeat or the breath, of creation, being able to breathe through all of us. That becomes this Aquarian force that actually gets shared in us and through us because we are here. And we are in honor and respect of the nature that we've been given, which is unique. And when we can honor and respect ourselves from that place of honoring the incongruencies, I don't make sense. I got this part over here that's in deep conflict with this part of here. How does that exist, right? And yet it does. And when we can do that for ourselves, then that which doesn't make sense outside of us becomes way easier to be with, because we're not trying to make that go away or make sense and become a coherent expression from a place of mental context or mental construct. It's not for our own safety. Like, things don't have to appear safe and congruent to us just for us to feel okay within ourselves, because we've done enough self cultivating and enough self respecting that that's no longer a necessary. I just believe that we have a much greater capacity for being with our own wild and each other's wild in a way that allows that to be a grounded force of natural strength and natural spirit and natural capacity that frees up the energy in a way that makes everything much more resilient and much more strong, because we aren't trying to push things aside that don't fit in. And for me, that's sort of what we're talking about here when we move into this sort of energy of the heart star, that is this stand for us to be liberated as a being through our own capacity to really anchor in our selfhood. Let me just stop there to see, like, is this hitting anything? Is this striking a chord for anyone? Because it does feel like such an essential part to being able to do part of what Liz was conjuring for us in a way from her own, sense of practice, which is having both the space for the new energy to come in and for the new openings to happen from a place of grounded self-connection, And without that grounded self-connection, without that ground, I think it can be much harder for these energies to get drawn down and in a way that's the most productive and healing.
Yeah, Marcella, this is all hitting. This is kind of when I was talking about the insights that were coming through this morning, it was right along these lines, because I was feeling this like wave of melancholia yesterday, and I didn't really know where it was coming from, but all my thoughts that were coming in were in that zone and that realm of like what's been unfair in my life, and kind of, brooding on that. And I woke up this morning and I just felt this gratitude that I don't have, like, I've been reorienting in my life from, I used to wake up and go, what's wrong in my life and how do I fix it? And that was my orientation. And I would always be looking for what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. And it would kind of, it would amplify it. And I've been reorienting to just the warmth in my heart and the gratitude that I feel. And one of the insights that I had was that it's okay if melancholy comes through, or you know, if I feel mad and sad when I think of my dad, you know, because I do. And I don't have to push it away, and I don't have to resolve it, and I don't have to fix it or do anything to it. And that just liberated me. Just that feeling of, wow, it's okay. I don't have to undo being mad or sad. And then, you know, since I wasn't pushing against it, it wasn't like really trying to be heard more. So
Mm,
it's an allowing of what is.
mm,
Yeah, I don't know if I can just build on what Lily just shared and what you were saying, Marcella, but when I was saying it feels odd, I think a key is, and I was actually studying some of our materials on Aquarius energy that we have, and you know, Aquarius has this amazing knack where it's the consciousness within and going within and really knowing your own truth, and then you take that truth and you bring it out to the world in a way that doesn't try to tell the world what to do, because when you have your own personal consciousness, I don't know that you project it onto other people, but you try to bring an equal respondent consciousness out of other people just by that wholeness that you find. And so I think what bothers me about the current energy, and what I said may not be the highest expression, is and I think someone else said it in their share, is when you don't do that step first and you just take on the consciousness of other people, then there's almost like a disingenuous kind of, you know, approach to how you live. And one thing I've been trying to do with this Aquarius energy is in wanting my freedom of knowing what's best for me and going within and finding my own truth, of allowing other people that freedom, even if they make an opposite decision of mine, and not trying to necessarily change their minds or influence them or even judge them as being different than me, but just celebrating that we each can go within and find our own truth. Because that, I think, is what feels odd that's going on with some of the intensity, is that people are kind of skipping some steps in the full integration of the Aquarius energy, and boomeranging to acting in that way, in a way that seems like almost, you know, ultimately not good for all and possibly destructive, because there is patterning of, you know, when you dream of a utopia or you dream of a better world, when you're starting from a place of not being whole, then there's just the risk that you could really miss, miss with that vision and what comes on. And that's what kind of scares me about this energy, because I don't know if everyone's taking that inner step.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I really appreciate you weaving in that piece of how we work with truth, and how important it is to be able to give respect to the things that we don't necessarily understand. And it doesn't matter, because there is that place of being able to trust that the process is there for each one to actually discover that. And it might be the exact opposite action, but it might be still the rightful action when processed through another person's reality and what another person needs to do to grow or serve or clear a pattern or whatever that might look like. So that was really well spoken. Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, go ahead, Fiona.
My thoughts are going on at 19 to the dozen. It's sort of allowing this full diversity that, and at the same time having, being able to discern properly, between like groupthink and community thing, and what's conspiracy and what isn't, and all of this sort of thing. The groundedness is really important. But the thing, when Lily was saying she felt, I can't remember what it was, like emotional or something the other day, I found myself, and I don't often, and it was in this dichotomy between wanting to be lovable but speaking the truth. Like I've always been awkward. Like I'll speak politics and religion when I wasn't meant to as a kid or whatever, or I speak something and it's not comfortable for people, and I'm a bit of a warrior, and that's not comfortable. But all the time, I want to be lovable, so that you get this thing going on, and occasionally that gets the better of me. Although I've just got used to being awkward and not whatever. But it seems like it's a triangle. It's not just the dichotomy. And Hegel comes in a way. It's like the antithesis and the synthesis. And the synthesis for me is, it's like what's coming in fully is like the soul. And when I remember that I'm a divine child, and in that bigger context, that's where the diversity really works. We can battle it out on the floor, on the ground, with not being racist, not being sexist, not being, all of this thing. But really, it's going to become so much easier when we know that there's a bigger picture and a bigger context that we're in. We're just moving around the furniture on the Titanic when we battle with ourselves in a sense. I just, pull out a prayer book, and I just remember I'm meant to be different. I have an individual purpose for being here. Every single one of us have. And when you see it in that context of, I see the higher self or the divine in you, and you see the divine in me, I think it's going to become easier for some reason for us to be able to do that without all the struggle. That's what takes me out of my loops when I get into it,
Mm, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Fiona. It feels like Fiona just like brought in that Uranus square Saturn energy too, which feels like it helps to bring in the rudder right now. It is actually like a square, so it takes it out of that polarity, and it starts to set up actually something that um, is stimulating it differently. So I want to honor that piece too, because the higher purpose and higher meaning to it all, um, whether it comes through vision, so whether it comes through being able to take the consciousness and see the big picture, or it comes through rudder, which I feel like sometimes can also be really a way that it's like the mission or the purpose like kind of rudders in there in a way that has the warrior, or the clarity, have that discernment, even if it's just for the individual, that feels like it really like oomphes it kind of gets things outside of just outside of the polarization. But thank you so much for weaving that in. I think that discernment, because there is a way as a collective that we are having to grow up. We are having to learn discernment. We are having to learn maturity. We are having to learn the difference between right and wrong. And we have to be able to have a both and consciousness that says that there can be a bigger picture in which right and wrong may exist in a perfect way, but that we have the intelligence and the discrimination to be able to say this is good for humanity and that is bad for humanity. And there is a way to be able to hold all of that in a totality. And actually, people that have come before us have been able to do those things. So in some ways, it's almost like reclaiming what we already know is possible, in terms of holding more complexity. So thank you for speaking to all that. That was really grounding, even with all of your air, Fiona. I do want to speak to a couple more of these things that have to do with the squares. I'm not going to get too much into the Uranus squares, but there's a bunch of them happening. And the only thing I want to say about that is, let those realizations, when they come, when the insight comes, however it's showing up within your particular nature, let them be so. Let them be that. Let those truths land, even when they come in a flash and they pierce through things that feel like they give you the stability that you need, things that maybe you've clung to in the past. When a truth comes right now that cuts through and penetrates those things, jot that stuff down. Let it be as valuable as it is, because it's important. it feels like there's an importance here in terms of how truth wants to get in here. Um, and that's all I want to say about that piece. Um, these Mars squares, I kind of just want to give a little more reference. Eliza feels like she kind of was bringing in the patterning piece, which um, there's a lot of real deal patterning stuff that we're dealing with ancestrally, collectively. And it takes something to unbind that kind of energy. Um, Collectively, the way this Mars force is working with all of these Aquarian patterns, it's not meant to be a straight shot. It's not meant to be, you know, here's the edge that we're growing, and I'm going to run to it and push it, push it forward another 10, whatever those things are called in football. It's definitely more, it's very much more like a tangled web happening, and that wanting to get free, a freedom that's wanting to happen in a tangled web. And so the patterns, as they're getting freed up, often will have a kind of abrasive feeling to them. It's the energy isn't meant to just be already open and clear. It's meant to feel sticky, and it's okay that it feels sticky. The invitation with it that I see is to just notice where we're standing in our own way, and be able to see that, and to be able to notice that that's actually I don't even want to say that it's actually just about getting out of the way, because it feels like it's not quite like just moving out of the way. It's almost like more like what Fiona was talking about. It's almost like letting something bigger than us sweep us out of the way. It's like allowing another current to be activating the energetic system in a way that isn't you as an agendaed person saying, I've got to get out of my own way. Now I'm going to get out of my own way. It's like the process has more to do with humility and more to do with surrendering to something greater than ourselves, that allows new energy to come in, that untangles the threads, so you just find yourself capable of not being in the way. So I feel like that's kind of an important thing to work with through this new lunar cycle. Let's see, how would I verbalize this one? There is some things happening around the masculine and the feminine. And in this kind of a square, in readings, what I find with folks that are kind of working with this energy, there has to be a trust between the parts of ourselves that allows there to be kind of a new dance to be danced. And so when it comes to our masculine nature and our feminine nature, and again, this already sort of polarizes it, but Mars, this setup wants to do that. It's going to create polarizations where they can open to something new. And so sometimes it's the softening on both sides and the safety and trust that can be built amongst those parts of ourselves that allows them to come together in a new way. So wherever we might have pre-existing ways of seeing ourselves, or seeing something like, this is my feminine side and this is my masculine side, and my feminine side feels like my masculine side always overrides certain qualities in me that makes me frustrated because I know the process could be much better. It's almost like letting go of whatever preconceived notions you have of how those parts of you exist, and letting a softening happen on both sides of it. And the feminine softening sometimes looks like opening in ways that feel unsafe, and the masculine side of it oftentimes has to do with trusting the feminine in ways that doesn't feel safe. So it's like both of those sides have some opening and softening to do to come together in a new way inside of ourselves. So wherever you might feel those kinds of tensions happening, sometimes it shows up in terms of how am I living in ways that feel nurturing versus how am I living in ways that feel productive. You can kind of play with that in terms of how it shows up for you, but that's just an example of common ways that conflict can present itself. Another piece of this is wherever you might be finding patterning that see, how do I explain this one? Okay, wherever the past very habitual ways of being that don't get you where you want to go. You know them. You know how it works. It's just a habit, and you can live with it. You've lived with it for a long time. It's actually not that big of a deal. But when it starts to get pressurized because there's something in you that just wants free of it, for no other sake than just being free of it, not because it causes real harm or not because it's, minimizing what you can do or whatever, but just that there's some tension there that wants to be free. One way you can work with some of those habitual ways of being, if they start to get pressurized, is to just remember when it comes up that there's actually there's nowhere to go with it. Like, you can't get to where you want to go from that place. It's just not going to take you anywhere. So it's kind of like seeing a bus ride or and it has a sign on it, and the sign might say, that thing I always do. And instead of getting on the bus, that's the thing that you always do, you just try to find the observer that says and notices, that doesn't take me where I want to go, and I'm just not going to get on the bus, and just see what happens. It doesn't mean you can't get on the next time. So you don't have to put a bunch of pressure on yourself. You don't have to make it like, I'm going to try heroin tonight or something, and I'll never be able to come back to this point in time. Like, it doesn't have to be super pressurized. It can just be finding a place to say, I'm not going to get on that always way of being bus. I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to watch. I'm just going to see what happens. And that practice can just be very powerful during astrology like this. It's just, we don't have to change. You know what I mean? We don't have to. We don't have to do it. It's most of us, everyone here, y'all are doing great, right? Really. There's nothing that has to happen. But it can be fun sometimes when you have these setups that are kind of intense, that are actually activating these kinds of patterns in a way that we don't always have access to. Just try some practices that might give you a new experience. So that's really the invitation here, is just, practice letting the bus go by a few times and just see what happens and notice. Because that's kind of what's really exciting me right now, is I feel like there's a lot that's coming in to show us new ways of being, and we need more energy to actually let them show us that. And the only way I know to free up energy in some places when I see this amount of squares on our personal, because these are all personal squares. A lot of them, yeah, they're personal squares. Is to actually just let the energy get redirected in some way. And so, as conscious beings that have choice, that's one area that we can actually free up energy, to let it move differently, is to just not hop on those habitual buses, and again to just really have a lot of self-affirming, um, compassionate grace too, for the entrenched ways of being that are always ways of being that are just really up right now too. And so even ones that may not have been actually feeling like habitual ways of being might actually show up in ways that may surprise us too, because that's part of what it is like to be, an expression of the ongoing of the people, all of our ancestors, and their need to also be able to feel the freedom sometimes of a definite choice that says, oh, I'm breaking free of that pattern. Grandmothers, grandfathers, all my relations, wow, you're here again, and I'm choosing a new course. And thank you for giving me my life. And thank you for all that has been swept for me to make a new course here. So anchoring in those choices feels important. Um, okay, I can tell. I do. So, are there any questions about this piece or comments? And then I do want to just say a little bit to honor Venus, before we complete tonight, because I have to.
Marcella, so you're talking about Mars doing this reprogramming stuff because it's squaring things. Is it specifically because it's in the sign of Taurus, or what exactly where is this reprogramming exactly coming from?
Well, it's just the aspect. So when Mars is aspecting other planets, and especially the ones that Mars is aspecting, that's this patterning that I'm talking about. So um, I'm not even really commenting on the Mars in Taurus part. I'm actually commenting more on the specific squares when Mars is squaring the moon, when Mars is squaring the sun, when Mars is squaring Mercury, and when Mars is squaring Venus and Jupiter. These are the kinds of tensions that want to get freed up, because it is creating a kind of an energy. And you got Mars going in a it just puts pressure on things. So in some ways, when you weave in the Mars in Taurus energy, then you actually also have this very strong Mars in a certain way, but a very essentially connected Mars. So it's not a Mars that's going to be, pushing out in ways that are restless in the same way that it would be if we were talking about, Mars in Sag or Mars in Aries. So I actually think the setup here is really sweet to be able to, um, really land in kind of the sovereign freedom that I think this sort of Aquarian energy also has to offer. So that's where I'm getting that from.
Got you. Okay, yeah, thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Fiona.
I just want to say I love what you're saying about, when we meet up with these habitual ways of doing anything, or saying anything, that you talk about just leaving a space, creating a space instead of trying to do something different or say something differently. You actually don't even do that. It's like it's just leaving the space and watching and being a witness. And that's what's lovely, that there's a sort of surrendering in that too, into the unknown, or to just letting go and discovering.
Yeah, I hope everyone brings me back an example. That would be like the best for the next lunar musing, is just an example of like what happens. Like I mean, I'll share just one little brief story of where I did this. It was a long, long time ago, super intense, dynamic. Um, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to give voice to it. But I just remember what it gave me access to was the depth of um, myself that I was not able to access on an emotional level because of that habitual way of being that was so much stronger than my capacity to feel my vulnerability and my, it was some moment with a lover of mine where I remember holding that space and then just feeling just waves of emotion that were so raw and so needed for my own sake that I could have never felt if I would have done the action and the habitual thing that I would always have done in that moment that, was, and it wasn't even dramatic kind of self-protection or any of that. It was actually very, very subtle, which was what the surprise was, that with that one subtle thing, um, just gave way to just felt like an ocean of self truth and self knowledge that wasn't accessible. So yeah, I'll just be really curious what may happen and what you all might discover just through that one, creating that opening, that opening, because it can be very different for different people what happens in that small space. All right, well, I'm really happy right now to give voice to Venus because just in a couple of days on Wednesday, um, she is going to be doing her kind of final act before she is put on the Inanna story, basically put on that meat hook as a corpse. And I cannot tell y'all how excited I am to die this time. Like, I just cannot wait to die. I've never felt so excited that there is this concept of death because, my God, just think if death didn't exist. That's a lot to carry, you know? So, as we're kind of moving in this, and she's going into the underworld in the sign of Aquarius, and she's going to be down there for 60 to 90 days, and this death by intent energy, um, it really does give us this opportunity to just shed and kill off all of the parts of ourselves that are no longer serving and really be open to receiving the reflections, the understandings, um, the pieces of ourselves that we've cut off or dismembered in some ways, shoved aside, didn't want to be with, didn't want to deal with, didn't have space for. So the absolute potential of another version of wholeness to come to us is really being made alive through this process of letting all that we've been carrying with us to die, that's ready to die. Um, so, specifically, the final gate is on February 10th, which is on Wednesday. And then she enters the underworld on the 13th. And she does not rise again until May 3rd. So she will not be visible in the sky. And then on May 3rd, she'll rise as the evening star in the west of the sky, for those of you that like to merge with her in the night sky or the morning sky. I'm not sure what else I want to say about that other than, Venus in Aquarius is, very much a ride in that there are ways in which it's very hard for Venus to really kind of take in the parts that don't line up, that are not beautiful, that are not fitting the picture that wants to be, conjured in some ways. And so I'm definitely feeling like this Venus and Aquarius energy going down into the underworld may also present us with some awesome disfigured in some ways pieces of ourselves that we have not been able actually to conceive how it all fits together. Let me just see if there's anything else here from that. Yeah, I mean, there's just a deep wholeness that comes from blending in those incongruent parts again, or those disfigured parts that don't fit the mental pictures that we have. Yeah, that's all I kind of want to say on that piece.
So this is what's happening based on where Venus is related to the sun. It's not about Venus going retrograde, is it?
No, not yet. So yeah, it's both a combination of Venus's relationship to the sun and the moon, but the reason why she disappears from the sky is that she gets so close to the sun that you can't see her. So that conjunction is definitely a part of that, is a part of that cycle. I'm just so ready to die. That's all I can say about it. Actually, I was so excited to talk about it, basically because I just think I'm so excited to die, and I want all of you to be potentially excited to die with me and like really embrace how beautiful death is. Like, it's amazing that we can die and be reborn, and just feels good not to resist it so much and not to be clinging, so much to the pieces that really just need to go. And what a break. I don't know why. It just feels like a special break for some reason this cycle, way more so than the last one for me. Is anyone else as excited to die as I am, or is this just my Taurian nature, like, bringing something new? You're ready,
I'm
Eliza?
feeling it. Like I said, I've been doing all this releasing stuff, ceremonies and shadow work, and yeah, I'm feeling it.
Nice. All right, well, I got Eliza's in the house. She's ready to die with me.
I'm in it too. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
reboot, defrag, move to a different country, to whatever. I love it.
Yeah. I'm just, Fiona, I don't think there's ever been a more lovable creature than you. So I'm so excited that you're like an awkward warrior on the inside. And I know there's moments where you are not feeling the love. I'm sure that happens because I'm sure your commitment to truth puts you in very precarious situations. But man, are you lovable. I just have to say, you are the most lovable. Even when you're dying.
Dying.
When you're dying. Yeah, I mean, the heat is on. The heat is on, y'all, and um, I'm glad that I'm personally very glad that I'm having fun with it, because I think that's really important. I think it's really important that we can um, walk in the footsteps of those beings that have been able to maintain their wholeness and their dignity and their alignment with freedom and truth and justice during times of great darkness and huge amounts of oppression and restriction. Um, if we can remember that tension, that narrowing in is the kind of pressure that frees and liberates and allows us to get truer and clearer and more honest with ourselves and cleaner and actually deeper in our rooted integrity and higher in our visionary capacities, then we will take everything that's coming at us and allow it to be the fertile energy that grows us. There is a way for us to use our power and our spirit and our strength of heart to flip it and flip it and flip it and feed it, feed the wholeness, feed and nurture the light, and just keep radiating. Let it do its work. It is not here to destroy life. It is not. It is here to show us what we are truly made of. It is here to activate our nature in a way that nothing else could activate it. It's just so important that we let it stretch us and expand us and root us and teach us about distortion, teach us about falsehood, teach us where we sacrifice our lovability to penetrate the fallacy. You know, give us an opportunity to slay the parts of ourselves that need to be slayed because they're not aligned with the higher vibrancy of what makes for a life-giving creature. We got it. You know, there is a part of each and every one of you and each and every one of us that is going to be tested and challenged, and that is also going to find something in us that can meet it. I really believe in that. I really trust that. So I just really invite you to take that with you in this next cycle, and store up. You know, I think we really do need to really practice storing up the energy and the light as we travel, so that we can just keep finding the resiliency that we need. I just got an. Do you do you, do you remember when those toys when you were a kid where you punched them and they would pop back up, and you'd punch them again and they'd pop back up? They had some kind of base on them that was super stable, and so they were different than the Weeble Wobbles. You know, the I can weeble, I can wobble, but I won't fall down. Those little things when they moved around. They were like big, you know, they were bigger. But that's what I'm invoking. I'm feeling each one of you as, you know, either the Weeble Wobble, or like the, no matter how many times it feels like you're getting pummeled, you just pop. Buoyant, you know? Buoyant. Are there any closing comments or words? Or I gotta go find pictures of the Weeble Wobbles now. I can't wait. They were definitely one of my favorite toys.
I just wanted to say real quick that when your enthusiasm or your energy when you're talking about you can't wait to die, I think it has to be significant that Venus is making the exact conjunction with Jupiter in between that final gate and when she enters the underworld, like on the 11th. So that's this Jupiterian, you know, expansion of the underworld, right? Like, yeah. And I love the Weeble Wobble thing because I was very sick a year ago, last March, with COVID, I believe. And that was the experience I had of it. Like, I know my body and I get lung stuff a lot. So I just thought it was that, but it didn't act like that. And it would be like I'd be 99% well, and then this thing would come back. Yeah. And it would be like, and I had this cartoon. I saw this cartoon, like those old cartoons where things were popping up out of the ground and they're taking the sledgehammer and hitting it, and then it pops up somewhere else and they're hitting it. And I think it comes back to what I had to find in that was the Leo sovereignty of, I'm not going to let this thing get me, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do. And I worked on all levels of being, from the spiritual to the physical, you know, everything. But it was really a statement of, I want to live. This isn't going to or I might die, but so because it was a total surrender process, but it's surrendering. Yeah, I might die. I'm not actually in control of this, you know, so it was going through that fear. And I'm going to know that I kept checking in with spirit to do everything I could in the moment
Yeah.
to, you know, to know that I fought the best fight at the same time that, yeah, if you're going to take me, you're going to take me. And
Yeah.
that just feels like how everything is right now.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, there's something about aligning with life. I might not be able to control whether or not I live or die, but I can stay aligned with life. And that doesn't have to be a fight. And yet, staying aligned with it isn't effortless all the time either. So, there's something about that dynamic, which I always feel like it's such an honor to be around people that are physically working with those energies because there's such powerful teachings and teachers in that. Um, but yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you, Sylviane, for weaving that in. Feels very raw and very true and very real in terms of the struggle. You know, there's something about that, what we choose in the struggle.
I would just say that I love your references to pop culture, and I forgot all about those bigger dolls that you punch. It was like almost like a punching bag,
Exactly.
and they would come back up. I forget what those are called though.
Liz
Um,
has one. It's a Liz just put. I don't know if you see Liz's screen.
no.
Oh, well, I can't really. Oh yeah, no, hold on. Keep it up there, Liz.
Okay, now I can
I
see
can't.
it. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Oh no, it
What's
just.
it called, Liz? What's it
It's
called?
called the Classic Clown Bop Bag.
Oh.
That's what I was seeing, the clown.
Yeah.
Yes, my brothers all had one. I wasn't allowed to play with it.
Oh boy.
We'll
I
have to
was
send you one.
ferocious. I think I would have broken it.
Marcella, I have a moon song if it'll fit.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Oh, see, I love it. We definitely need a moon song.
I just have to get my harp here. I didn't write this one. This was written by a couple of friends of mine in the band Woodland. It's called Morgana Moon.
Beautiful.
The crescent lifts her shadowy veil, and the wood grows bright with silver light. The queen of night in a crown of stars dances through the clouds in flight, and in her face a memory of long ago in a distant sea, when she called upon the ocean waves, spoke of times forgotten days. She calls me to the river, holds me by the water, gazing in her mirror, glimpse of forever. And as her love showed on the sea, and the clouds danced over the thirsty land, falling upon the distant peaks, down to the valley how the waters ran, and the sea became many rivers, journeying alone. Even forgetting from whence they came, they always ran towards home again. She calls me to the river, holds me by the water, gazing in her mirror, glimpse of forever. She calls me to the river, holds me by the water, gazing in her mirror, glimpse of forever. By the light of the moon so bright in the valley where the waters meet, two rivers becoming one and then journeying home to the sea. By the light of the moon so bright in the valley where the waters meet, many rivers becoming one and then journeying home to the sea, yeah, to the sea, to the sea, yeah, to the sea.
Wow, thank you so much, Lily. That was so gorgeous.
You're welcome.
I even had the experience of picking up the phone because it's one of my friend's birthdays. And I said, "This is Lily Swan from Hawaii." She's like, "I know Lily Swan." It's like, "I used to live in Hawaii. I know Lily."
Small world.
Small world. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll hopefully we'll see some of you on Wednesday. Mark will be back in action with his CWR live, so that'll be at 2:30. And otherwise, we will, we'll see you all when we see you all soon.
Thanks, Marcella. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marcella.
Happy New Moon. Happy Lunar New Year.
Thank you.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye.